I want to talk to you today about a tough question, and tough questions happen when we experience personal tragedy, when those around us experience personal tragedy, and when our nation experiences personal tragedy, and that's certainly what happened last Friday. So I want to ask and answer the question, how could God let that happen? And of course, I'm talking about the Sandy Hook Elementary shooting. How could God allow that to happen, the death of so many innocent children? For many of us, it was a reminder of what happened in 1999 at the Columbine High School shooting. How could God let that happen? We wrestled with it at the time. And maybe you're a junior high or a high schooler, and this is the first time that you've experienced something like this. You've seen coverage of an event like this, and you're wondering, how could a powerful and good God really allow this to happen? And that's a great question to ask, and so let's answer it with 4 truths about tragedy. Any tragedy you experience, there's 4 things that I want you to think about. The first is this: God is not the author of sin. Genesis 1 and the rest of the Bible make clear that God does not author sin. He didn't create sin. When God created the world, He created it good. We read there in verse 31 in the account of creation, God saw all that He had made, and it was very good. And there was evening and there was morning, the 6th day. When God made the world, when He made the universe, there was no sin in it because God does not create sin. And so this work of evil was not the plan of God. This did not come from the heart of God. In fact, the second truth is that what happened breaks God's heart. Whenever tragedy happens, it breaks the heart of God. Jesus is the revealer of God to us. He shows us what God is like. He shows us what God thinks about tragedy and everything else. And we read about what happened when Jesus' friend Lazarus died. In verse 33, he came upon Lazarus' sister who was weeping, and it says that Jesus was deeply moved in spirit and troubled because his friend was dead. Verse 34, "Where have you laid him?" he asked. "Come and see, Lord," they replied. In verse 35, very simply, Jesus wept. When Jesus' friend died, He wept. It broke His heart. Now, understand, Jesus was about to raise him from the dead, but even so, He still empathized with the situation, and He wept because He experienced sorrow. And I firmly believe that no one in the universe feels the sorrow and the pain of evil more than God does, that God grieves deeply over the lives that were lost. The third truth I want to tell you is that this came about because of sin. All evil in the world comes about because of sin. Genesis 3 tells us how sin entered the world, and it entered through humanity, through the choices of Adam and Eve. And all of the sin and all of the evil in the world, ultimately God is not the author, we are the authors through our sinful choices. And so when evil happens, it's because we live in a world that is broken and sinful. And sometimes innocent people like those kids are harmed because of sinful choices of others. And that's certainly what we saw. But understand, this comes about because of human sinfulness, because of our free choice to disobey God. But the fourth thing that you need to understand is someday this will all be gone. Someday all this evil and all this pain will be gone. Revelation 21 tells us that Jesus will return and He will wipe away every tear, and sin will be no more, and disease will be no more, and evil will be no more. And that is our great hope as Christians, is that someday it will all be gone. And so I want to encourage you, keep all this in mind as you experience tragedy. I wish I could tell you this was the last tragedy that you're going to experience in your life, but it's not. You're going to have more personal tragedy, and we're probably going to experience more national tragedy. But I want to encourage you with this last thought. Don't be afraid to express your sadness and frustration to God. You look at the Psalms, and it's just people like you and me pouring out their heart and saying, "Why, God? How could you allow this?" And you can say that to God. He's big enough. He can hear it. Just pour out your heart to Him.